Hi, everybody. Welcome to our DAT IQ Weekly Market Update. This is our update for September 9. It's episode 354. I'm Dean Croak, Market Analyst here at DAT. Our special guest today is Chuck Snow, CEO, avid Mack truck collector. He's owner of the Chuck Snow Collection, founder of Traffics, retired, lives in Canada now outside of Toronto. Chuck, great to be have you on the show. This is wonderful. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. How are you today?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for having me. And I've been looking forward to it as well. Thank you.
I was looking through some videos I had this morning, and I still have to edit the video of you driving Philip Dixon's 359 Peterbilt on the wrong side of the road.
That was when I was telling somebody about that last night, and I said, I've been driving a 13-speed. It was the first transmission I ever drove in a tractor trailer. I've been driving them for over 50 years, and I failed miserably with my left hand. And an old friend of mine said, well, the first time I went to England, it took me a day to get used to shifting with my left hand. Yeah. So maybe I'm not that far off.
It was funny for those that don't know. Chuck and I went to Australia last November. Chuck went for a wedding, and I went to hang out. We went out to the middle of Australia to visit a friend, and Chuck got to drive a 359 Peterbilt. Of course, everything's on the opposite side of the road, but the truck shift patterns are all the same, but you've got to do it with the opposite side of your body. But we're driving down the road, and Chuck's shifting, and after a little while, I thought he'll eventually figure this out because he's on the wrong side of the road. And I said, Chuck, you're on the wrong side of the road. I kept saying, Chuck, you're on the wrong side of the road.
Luckily, it was a very quiet country road. So,
well, that's the great joke. I used to say to people, I used to run off the road a lot when I was tired. The joke is there's nothing to hit when you're out in the middle of nowhere. So, Chuck, it's great to have you. You've become a great friend. We connected through social media, of course.
Yes, bye.
And I was with Mike Gaffin, of course, at the Big Iron Classic, and with your good friend Bob Nuss on the weekends. That's another great connection we've made. Tell us a little bit about yourself just quickly, because we're going to dive into some of the things you're doing with your Chuck Snow collection up there. But tell us briefly about yourself so the viewers can get a feel for what's coming at the end of the show.
Well, I got into the trucking industry at 21 because I wasn't allowed anywhere near a tractor trailer in Ontario until that age because of insurance and everything else. So on my 21st birthday, a friend of mine rented me a Hertz tractor, a cab over sleeper Ford W model, and we went trucking for a day. Didn't know how to downshift it, but we could upshift it okay because a guy I knew that sold international trucks gave me the quick and dirty how to shift it. Yep. So I didn't look like an idiot going out of the yard. And we drove it for a day, and I was hooked. And a few weeks later, I rented a tractor with a trailer and got some instructions from a professional driver. And I went trucking for a day with a friend of mine after we got our instructions with I guess it's probably a 45-foot trailer. And you know the story on that one. I don't think I have time to go into that one today, but it was pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
But it really, really, it told me what I needed to do, and I wanted to get into the trucking industry.
Yeah.
In the worst way. And I went looking for a job, couldn't get one because nobody would hire a 21-year-old kid with zero experience, especially back in those days, because trucking was a very coveted job. And if your uncle or your dad or your brother weren't truck drivers, you weren't going to become one either, especially through the Teamsters Union. So I'm always able to find a way around. And my workaround was I found a 1966 F model Mack cab over sleeper that was for sale. And I ended up buying that. And it came with a contract. And I bought that truck, and the fellow I bought it from, who was the dispatcher at a gypsy truck line, and these were truck lines that did not have authority whatsoever. And how we circumvented it was we rented or leased the truck to the customer, and the driver worked for a driver service, a pseudo driver service agency. And the guys that have been doing it for years did it and understood it, but I understood it much better than they did. It interested me, it fascinated me.
Right.
So I ended up buying the truck and becoming an expert at leasing. And then ended up about 8 months later, I sold the truck and started to rent trucks. And I saw an opportunity of buying plants down in Florida. So I was buying plants in Florida and hauling them up and blowing them out at my family at their retail operation. They had a huge retail store at the time. And then I did that for a couple of years. And then the bottom fell out of plants, market saturation. And took a year where I did a little bit of trucking, but not much, and planned a business strategy for an entire year on starting my own gypsy trucking company, which I did, and I operated it on top of the flower shop for a year, and we did really well. We started one rental truck. By the time we finished, I think we had 12. One was an owner operator and 11 rental trucks. Basically sold the company to somebody. There wasn't much to sell, to be honest, because there was no assets.
Right.
And I started traffics with another fellow, and my wife would help at night, and Mary, and we built it from there. And it started with two of us in the office, and built it up. Eventually, it took from 1979 to 2022. But when we sold, we had hit $1 billion in sales, and this was on the brokerage side.
Yeah,
it was traffics.
It's quite the size brokerage business, and many people realise that. I was shocked when you said that when we were in Australia at the conference. There, I didn't realise it was that big. It's quite.
Yeah, we had worked at it a long time, and we made all the right decisions. Not always, but when it was crucial, we made the right decisions.
Yeah.
We hired the right people. We have the company still has a very good company culture. It's something that we developed over years.
Yeah.
And we just had a great time building it. But 2022, it was time for my wife and I wanted to do other things. We wanted to travel. I wanted to pursue a passion of collecting old Mack trucks, and we've done both.
Yeah.
So it's been a great ride.
Yeah. All right. Let me dive into the market update, talk about some data, and then we'll bring you back in and we'll talk a bit more about the Chuck Snow collection.
Sure.
All right. Let's dive into the market update. We'll talk about some of the data, the key things we're watching this week. Spot rates were up pretty much as we predicted 2 weeks ago because of the short week. Last week, spot rates up across the board for all of our three equipment types, up in the 6 to 10 cents range. Over last year, we pretty much said that would happen. They've maintained that for the last couple of weeks. I think that'll be interesting to see if it comes down this week. A lot of the latent capacity jumps back into the market this week, and I think that'll reduce the spread over last year. So rates were up last week. Again, no surprise there. If they do stay up this week when everyone's back at work, that will be very interesting. If capacity tightens again this week, that'll be a sign that the market is starting to tighten. I don't think so, though. The ISM PMI came out last week, up slightly. The new orders index was up, but that was up because the market is showing a little bit of positivity in terms of new orders, but that's up for the first time after being down for 6 months. A little bit of good news there. The Logistics Managers Index headline number showed some moderate growth, but some bad news. The transportation sub-indice, they've got two indices, the capacity index and the prices index, showed a negative inversion. Prices were down, capacity was up. When these two indices cross over, it generally means that we're in recessionary territory. They did it in 2019 and 2022. It was only a 1 month negative inversion, only slight. We will watch anxiously if this happens again in September. Class 8 truck orders came out nearly identical to July, but down 19% year over year. This week's market update will be out this evening at dat.com/market update. All right, let's dive into some of the finer data points. The load to truck ratio and dry van down. Of course, a short work week, so don't read too much into the week over week numbers. Fewer trucks posted, fewer loads posted. Load to truck ratio, slight increase to 6.94. In the refrigerated market, volumes predictably down 26% on a short work week. Load to truck ratio settled at about 10.8. In flatbed, load post volumes were steady for the 5th straight week, but up about 23% year over year. That's significant. A lot more flatbed volume in the market, in the spot market, that is. There was about a 16% decrease in carrier posts, again, because of the short work week after Labor Day. Load to truck ratio up to 23.14 loads per truck. Rates in the year-over-year look, three categories. The 7-day rolling average, spot rates up a penny, averaging 169. That's excluding fuel, 7 cents a mile higher than the same time last year and 2023. Market's essentially stuck, not a lot of movement. The average rate on our top 50 lanes based on the volume of loads moved, not loads posted, averaged 203. That's 34 cents a mile higher than the 7-day rolling average. In our bellwether states, the 13 key Midwest states represents about 46% of loads moved. Remember, that's loads moved, not loads posted. So almost half of the loads moved in DAT's network. They correlate the tightest with our national trends. Spot rates up 2 cents a mile on an 18% lower volume of loads moved due to the short work week. Carriers paid an average of $1.92 last week. That's about 23 cents a mile higher than the 7-day rolling average. So rates up 2 cents a mile in the bellwether states. In reefer, combination of carriers taking time off after Labor Day and carriers continuing to exit the industries, and carriers of all sizes reducing their fleet size resulted in tighter capacity last week in the spot market. Carriers ended the week around 7 cents per mile higher than the last 2 years, averaging $2.06 last week. We're going to monitor this if this trend persists as the industry returns to full operation last week. So very tight reefer capacity last week during the short work week. In flatbed, for the third consecutive week, flatbed spot rate gap between this year and last continues to widen. It now stands at 10 cents per mile higher than last year. Last week, the national average flatbed, excluding fuel, increased by nearly 2 cents per mile, reaching $2.06 per mile for all carrier outbound loads. Let's have a quick look at our short-term forecast before we bring Chuck back in. Remember, these are our short-term forecasts out 35 days. This is using RateCast. It's predicting what loads will be out to about October 10. It more heavily weights longer-term seasonal trends for loads over 550 miles, excluding fuel. In dry van, RateCast is expecting rates up about 3 cents a mile across all three forecasts. We're seeing some optimism in the forecasts here. Out to October 10, RateCast thinks rates will be up about 3 cents a mile out to October 10 at $1.71 by the end of the forecast range. If that holds true, rates will be about 8 cents per mile higher than last year. The red line is the lowercase bear case forecast. It expects rates down 3. If that happens, high case up 10. I think the RateCast in green is probably pretty close to where we see the market going. In refrigerated, a little bit more pessimistic though, which again, it'll be interesting to see if the market does start to deteriorate a little bit following that 7 cent per mile increase this week. Reefer rates are expected to decrease 2 cents a mile over the next 4 weeks. There's a good possibility that will happen. If rates do end up at about 203 by the time we get out to October 10, they'll still be 8 cents per mile higher than where they were last year. At October 10 last year, they were at $1.95. So still 8 cents a mile better than last year, which will be good news for carriers if that happens. And of course, by the time we get out to the early part of October, we're getting into that time frame where Thanksgiving data starts to emerge into the rate per mile trends. Flatbed up 4 cents a mile out to October 10. Again, that's seasonally when we start to see rates start to move up. They'll start that upward trend as we get into the colder months, and they'll keep that trend going all the way through to May next year if they follow those seasonal patterns. RateCast is expecting rates up 4 cents a mile out to the 10th of October, ending that forecast range at $2.11. If that happens, they'll be up 14 cents a mile compared to last year. October the 10th last year, they were at $1.97. So a lot of strength in the flatbed market, according to RateCast. Low case has rates down 1, high case has rates up 8 cents a mile. All right, let's bring Chuck back in. Chuck, start off your segment. How big is the Chuck Snow collection these days?
We are 11 trucks right now.
11 trucks. Wow. I remember when it was just one. I thought this
I
is...
know. I started with that F model Mac, and then I bought a B model, and then I've been adding whenever I find out about a Mac that needs a new home.
Yeah. Now, are these Macs that desperately need a new home, or are they just sitting around doing
You know,
nothing. And
the vast majority of them are owned by people that have reached an age where they're either cashing out.
right,
Their wives say to them, Harold, you've spent all your spending money for the last 10 years rebuilding this truck.
right.
You're 84 years old. Maybe we can take a holiday before one of us can't travel anymore. Like, come on, Harold, you're getting too old to even drive it to the shows anymore.
Right.
So Harold puts an ad in the back lot or in truck paper, and Chuck sees it.
Yep.
And I guess this thing is kind of like those rodeo bulls that they have out west, the mechanical bulls that the boys get drunk and they get on. They all think they can hang on, and they get thrown off. It's the same sort of thing. And this is my chance to be the custodian of one during my period of time when I'm in them. And I guess at some point I may age out. I hope not. I do everything so that doesn't happen, but that could happen. And if my children or my grandchildren don't have a passion for this, I certainly do not see either of my children having a passion for trucks. My son grew up in the business because he loves the trucking and logistics businesses, but he trucks himself. He's grown out of that where I never did. Maybe I have a grandchild that will like them. I haven't seen any of them really. Well, maybe my youngest one, but he's only 2.5. So it's not, I can't really tell yet.
Yeah.
But he's my only hope.
It's a fascinating thing to watch. I was struck by Charlie Tackerberry's collection when we went up there. I got to see Dan Welsh's collection last week in Minnesota.
Right.
Welsh Industries. Dan's a big maker of cement mixers.
Right.
Dan, but it's out in the middle of the cornfields. And you would never know it's there, but he's got the most amazing collection. He had a replica of my father's 1959 F600 V8 Ford pickup or truck, identical to my father's very first truck. And he's got some beautiful Peterbilts and Kenworths. And then, of course, we went to Bob Nuss's museum, which was just breathtaking to see trucks from the Hoover Dam construction project, some old fire trucks, just the big Mammut R700 Mac, just some really cool trucks. I love the history part of it, but I'm fascinated in the collector part of it because I think Bob's done the way it should be done, which is they've made it a 501c. They've given it a life. It's got video tours, so it's kind of open to the public, which with the succession planning part of it, which you touched on. And I think that must be something that everybody grapples with once you build this massive collection. What next?
Yeah. And, I've talked to my family about starting a foundation, and at 11 trucks is not worth it. But when you get to be the size of Charlie Tackerberry and his family, or Bob Nuss and his family, it certainly makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah. Another one that we talked about was Gary Mahon. He's got an amazing collection also. I didn't realize the extent of some of these collections when you go to some of the ATHS events. Because my first event was the ATHS in York. That was my first exposure to the historic.
The one recently where you were running around on a scooter?
So I was scooter camp. And I'd been to the Bay State chapter here in Massachusetts, and I just a bunch of old Macs. And, I'd never really thought about it because they were still work trucks. Like here in New England, a lot of these old Macs and R models and F models, they still run around hauling. I never really thought too much about it. And then I started to go to the truck shows, and then I started to realize how significant it was. Because then it dawned on me when I would go to the shows, particularly the one in Springfield. I don't know when it was. It may have been a national show, Chuck. But I started to what really got me thinking about it was the number of people in golf carts that had oxygen equipment. Because what occurred to me was this was the generation moving on. This was the generation that trucking was built on.
Yes.
And this was what we were talking about now was the preservation of the legacy they created, which was the pre-deregulation legacy.
Yes.
And when you go to in Madison, where we were, you saw 3 trucks from Smokey and the Bandit, Convoy,
Right.
and BJ and the Bear from those famous movies that Hollywood made. So what you saw in Madison in particular were trucks that were famous both from Hollywood's perspective, but famous from all of the truck show books I used to read as a teenager and trucker in Australia, from the truck show circuits.
Right.
And I'm sure people all around the world used to watch and read books about truck shows in America with all of the stainless steel and all of the bling that they used to have. And you get to see those trucks and meet the people that were behind those stories. I think that's the part that I love the most, is meeting people, particularly at the Big Iron Classic. We got to talk to some people that used to drive these 1960 model trucks.
And there's not too many left, and this is, this is the history and legacy of our industry.
Yeah.
And I had dinner with John Gravely, from the president of ATHS, and he was telling me their biggest challenge is their members are dying.
Yeah.
And the younger people, and no insults meant, but they don't have time, for anything. I look at my own children, and they're not involved in social clubs or anything like this. They don't have time between running around with kids and earning a living. They don't have time. And the same thing goes for these younger people, for the vast majority of them, especially right now that are in the trucking sector. They don't have time to devote to going to ATHS meetings or local. Most of them don't. It's an old guy sport.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the reason I do what I do on social media. I'm trying to pump up everyone's tires and put a positive spin on the industry and make it as attractive as I can, to make people think that this industry is somewhat cool. And of course it is. To you and I, it's cool. Like, we love the industry because it's in our veins. We wouldn't do anything else.
Very much so.
For most people outside the industry, it's not something that they immediately think of as a career, because for us, it's like, it's who we are. It's what we do. It's not a job. It's like, it's our life.
It's a passion.
But for other people, they struggle to move from job to career to passion. And that's what I love about you, because it's been your entire life. But
yes.
Most people wouldn't know, you're sitting in a big shed, and not far from you is a big wash bay and workshop, and then through the door is 11 trucks.
Exactly. This is what I always dreamt of. How lucky, and I know how lucky I am, and I never lose track of that. I'm probably the luckiest guy you're ever going to meet. I've got it all. I'm doing what I want to do, and I've lived the life I want to live. Now, there were some bumps along the way, but we all have them. That's life. But I've been blessed, and just getting to, especially in these days, being able to play with these trucks and share them with people and take them to truck shows and go on media and mentor people and all the things I get to do. It's a dream come true. Yeah,
it is. I'm not in the Chuck Snow collection stratosphere, but at the end of that highway behind me, which is Route 66, there's a 379 Peterbilt parked outside the house here at my house. But Chuck, at the Big Iron Classic, I did meet a family that it's really worth talking about. I met the Cornelius family, and I think that I met the 4th generation, and they're from Minnesota. I met Dylan and LJ.
Right.
And then I met their father, Scott. I didn't meet Wally, and I think Wally was the father. I don't know whether it was the grandfather or not. I didn't meet all of them. They have a pulling team, so they have trucks that do the pulling. Scott drove in at a 1953 220 Cummins Peterbilt, and he had the 2 Peterbilts on the back that they did the pulling the sled on the Saturday night. What was really impressive, and I'll post these videos on my social media channel this week, but LJ and Dylan, teenagers, they were very proud of the fact that they don't play video games, and they had built these 2 small trucks One was out of scrap metal with, I'm going to say, small lawnmower engines
Right.
that they drive around in. Like they're like miniature trucks that they built out of scrap metal. And they're the most amazing kids. And the dad said to me, I had nothing to do with this. They built them on their own. Now, the dad is a guy that builds big engines, big truck engines, like
Okay.
self-taught. And he said, I started tinkering with truck engines with my dad in the workshop when I was like 5 years old. So this is like a fourth generation family of people that just live and breathe trucks. And I thought it was such a rare thing to find a multi-generational family that were just so passionate about this industry. But this is a rarity. This is not something you see a lot of these days. And this is why I think John Gravely at the ATHS really struggles, because there's not a lot of families like that will be the continuation of organizations like the ATHS, because the base that we need to grow the historical society is actually probably shrinking rather than
Very much
expanding.
so.
We would pull members from.
That's the biggest issue.
Yeah.
And with what's going on and what's gone on in the last couple of years in the trucking industry, it has extinguished a lot of hope for a lot of people, because they've worked their hearts out to build a business. And now, one of the trucks, I'm not going to mention, but one of the trucks that I bought, a beautiful, beautiful truck, a gentleman spent a fortune restoring it 25 years ago, and he had to sell it. And I think one of the reasons he was forced to sell it was because of the money needed to be injected back into the trucking company.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. Chuck, this has been one of the toughest times, I think, for a lot of people in the trucking industry. We're on the tail end of a 3-year freight recession. This has been incredibly tough for a lot of people. I'm hearing more and more of carriers reducing their fleet size just as a means of survival.
That's the only way. Yeah, it's the only way they're going to survive.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, from my own personal perspective, this is the toughest it has ever been in the 51 years I've been around the industry.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, and I was shocked I was meeting with a customer, or one of our customers last week, and I was just horrified that their shipper was asking them for 120-day credit terms in lieu of a rate decrease. Like 120-day credit terms, Chuck, for hauling freight is like, I don't know, you got to float that amount of capital. That's a lot of money. I mean, I see it with my wife's catering business at 45 days, 120 days on freight. Think about your fuel bills, your driver wages. Like, that's unsustainable in business. And
Dean, I could not agree more on that, because the biggest issue, besides even if you had to get the money from a factoring company, the amount of money it would cost you to borrow that money, that's number one. The only way you could do it is if somehow you were able to get a non-recourse factoring for 120 days, which I doubt you would get, because too much can happen in 120 days.
Yeah.
The healthiest of companies can go bankrupt very easily within 120 days.
Yeah. And Chuck, we haven't talked about the economy yet, and some of the dire predictions that people are making about the economy. John McCown, who you might know, is talking about some of a fairly big drop off in freight volumes. We're talking about like a 17% decrease in import volumes over the next 6 months. I'm really worried about exports in particular. I think there's we're in for a fairly big shock here. I was talking to some carriers on the weekend that are heavily reliant on exports. They were machinery haulers for the developed combines in the Midwest, and I said, how busy is it? Because it's harvest season, and normally they are flat out hauling combines. He said it's dead. We're not hauling combines. We normally do 2 loads a week. We're doing 1, and of course, last week reports China hasn't ordered any soybeans this year. They're buying from other countries because of the trade war.
Yeah.
So and of course, if they're not buying soybeans and their harvest is not happening to the degree that it should in terms of prices, farmers aren't buying machines, truckers aren't hauling said machines, and that has a ripple effect throughout the entire freight market. I worry about what that means, because it's not just farm machinery, it's the carriers that would normally haul pork
Right.
live or processed to Oakland for export,
Right.
to Savannah for export. Like, so there's a whole trickle down effect that exports have on the entire freight market. It includes dray carriers for empty reefer boxes to the Midwest for loading. So there's a lot of things that have to play out before we get through this next period in time. I have no idea where this lands. None of us know. I just know that there's a lot of uncertainty in the market, and carriers, I think, are really desperate to get some sense of certainty, but none of us have any answers. And that's the tough part. I think we said a few months ago that this will be a 6-month period of survival. And I just don't know how carriers get through it, because there is no sense of certainty here. I think what most carriers are certainly doing is reducing costs everywhere they can. And one of those strategies, of course, is reducing fleet counts as aggressively as they can.
Well, they have to. The unfortunate thing is they reduce their fleet count. Those trucks go back in the market.
Yep.
Somebody buys that truck that's really, right now you can probably buy a really good truck for, let's say, $30,000 that would be regularly $50,000.
Right.
And they go and they undercut your rate somewhere.
Right.
And that's going on all over.
Yeah. Chuck, we're up on time. This has been a fascinating discussion. We need to get you back on the show to talk more about the Chuck Snow collection. I need to get up there. I need to get up there and do a video of this so people can see what we're talking about. You've got one of the most amazing collections of Mack trucks, probably one of the coolest cruise liners I've ever seen. I'll be honest, I didn't know a cruise liner existed until I saw yours.
Well, you know what? They're pretty rare, and they're pretty rare. And the fellow that restored that did a great job.
We just had R models and F models in Australia that we never were fancy enough to have cruise liners. But I tell you what, I did see a lot of drivers coming into the Big Iron Classic in R models and F models without power steering. That was real old school. Yeah.
You can always tell they've got arms like Popeye.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why most Australian truck drivers have got long arms and hands like bears. So.
Yeah, I noticed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, let's wrap this up. So a couple of shout outs. Don't forget, tune into Radio Nemo and Road Gang Radio every day, 7 a.m. on iHeartRadio, Facebook Live and YouTube, 7 a.m. Central. Chris Kaplis, Professor Kaplis, talking to Dr. Alex Leslie, Senior Research Associate at ATRI, talking about truck operating costs. Next week, we've got Dan Deegan. He'll be live from Canada. Chuck, how can people get in contact with you if they want to learn more about the Chuck Snow collection?
Best way, and send me an email, chucksnow280@outlook.com.
All right, great. Thank you. Again, folks, make sure you set up alerts to our live show, subscribe to our channel. And with that, another show is in the books. Thanks for watching. Be safe, be nice to everybody. And we'll see you next week at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific.